Welcome to the deep dive. Imagine, just for a moment, using something like a fairy tale structure, from childhood, to understand complex political beliefs. Sounds a bit strange, right?
It definitely does. But that's exactly what we're exploring today. Our focus is a YouTube video. It's titled The Leftist Fairy Tale Cult by a creator called Mr. Reagan.
Right. And his central idea, the premise he puts forward, is that some political beliefs can actually be understood using what he terms a fairy tale analogy.
So our mission here, for you listening, is really to unpack that argument. We'll look at the specific examples he gives and dig into the reasons he suggests for why people might hold beliefs he calls provably false.
Exactly. The goal isn't to endorse his, but to help you understand this particular perspective from the source. It's about giving you the tools, really, to engage critically with the information yourself.
Think of it as a way to get a quick but pretty thorough grasp of one specific take on the current political scene. Maybe it'll offer an aha moment, about how beliefs get formed or how information gets processed, or, as the source might say, misprocessed.
Okay, so let's jump right in. The video kicks off pretty boldly with this claim. Leftist beliefs are like fairy tales. Now, that could easily sound dismissive.
Right, it could. But he explicitly says that's not the intent. He actually emphasizes that the analogy isn't meant to dismiss ideas, but more to explain them.
Explain them? How so?
Well, he says he prefers a dignified approach to debate. He wants to focus on things like corruption, ineptitude, and bad policy decisions, rather than, say, personal attacks and these are his examples, Joe Biden sniffing or senility.
Though he adds a little caveat for comedy, right?
He does, yeah. He mentions comedic content might be different. But generally for him, this fairy tale framework is a tool to understand the underlying motivation.
That's an important distinction, isn't it? Using an unexpected frame like a fairy tale to try and analyze why people hold certain beliefs, whatever those beliefs are. It's trying to get at the why.
Precisely. And that leads us straight into his core assertion that people on the left believe things he calls provably false or even obviously false.
That's a very strong claim. And he apparently listed these examples just off the top of his head. Can you walk us through some of them? What kind of things does he put on this list?
Sure. It's a surprisingly long list, actually. And he presents them all as demonstrably untrue. In his view, they cover specific political controversies, things like the Trump-Russia hoax, the Zelensky phone call quid pro quo, the idea that the Hunter Biden laptop is a Russian plant. He also includes famous quotes or alleged incidents like losers and suckers or good people on both sides, even the story about Trump supposedly grabbing the steering wheel of the beat.
And January 6th?
Yes, interpretations of the January 6th events are on there too, but it goes beyond just those big political moments.
What else?
He includes broader social and cultural claims, things like Mar-a-Lago only being worth $18 million for tax purposes, the dictator on day one comment, the bloodbath.
And characterizing certain groups.
Yes, like calling extreme gay Republicans domestic terrorists. Then there are cultural issues like alleged book burning, the don't say gay controversy, even beliefs about health, like obesity is healthy.
Wow, okay, keep going.
He also lists the existence of systemic racism, the idea that illegal immigration is a good thing, or that the border is secure, and then views on identity and biology like conservatives are racist, the effectiveness of masks against COVID described as a thin layer of fabric, the idea that boys can be girls and girls can be boys, and finally that biological men have no inherent athletic advantage in sports if they claim to be a woman.
That is quite a list. What Mr. Reagan seems to be highlighting there is this huge range of topics where he sees a fundamental break from factual reality, from politics to biology.
Exactly. And this list, he says, sets the stage for why he thinks people hold these views. He claims there are countless examples.
Okay, so let's unpack that. If he's asserting people believe provably false things on this scale, what reasons does he initially explore for why this happens? And why aren't those reasons enough for him?
Right. He looks at three common explanations first, but finds them lacking. The first one is what he calls an irrational desire about being right, about being left. Basically, justifying past beliefs by accepting new, potentially false ones, like one lie requires 5 others.
Like digging yourself deeper.
Sort of, yeah. Second, he points to intense dislike of Trump, what some call Trump derangement syndrome, which he thinks primes people to accept certain narratives.
A common talking point.
It is. And third, he mentions mass formation psychosis. That theory about large groups developing shared, maybe irrational beliefs, especially when anxious or isolated.
Okay, so those are the initial ideas. Why does he think they fall short?
Because in his view, they don't really explain why leftists are drawn to the left in the first place. They explain maintaining beliefs, maybe, but not the initial attraction.
I see.
He also briefly mentions a more extreme idea, extreme sadism, the notion that some people just hate the world and want to see it burn.
That sounds pretty dark.
It is. He gives an anecdote about a college friend who supposedly voted Democrat out of a desire to see others suffer because he felt life had dealt him a bad hand. But Mr. Reagan says he puts this darker view to one side to focus on broader explanation.
Right. So if those explanations aren't sufficient for him, where does he go next? This is where the fairy tale idea really comes in, isn't it? He says, Democrats sell a fairy tale. What are these core stories?
Yes, this is central to his argument. He identifies two main fairy tales. The first one is egalitarianism, the simple idea that everyone should be equal.
Which sounds pretty appealing on the surface.
Absolutely. He actually calls it a beautiful fairy tale, and even admits it's something he would love to believe in.
But he sees a problem with it in reality.
Yes. His counter is that humans are, in his words, basically animals, driven by basic needs: food, water, shelter, and the compulsion to procreate.
Okay, the biological basics.
Right. And beyond that, he argues, we're driven by things like social status, maybe duty to God, family, country, but also popularity, drugs and alcohol, comfort, and a desire to win, to be better than others. And he adds, everybody really wants money.
So his point is
that ignoring these, let's say, less idealistic motivations makes effective governance impossible. He sees the egalitarian ideal crashing against what he views as fundamental human nature.
Okay, that's the first fairy tale. What's the second one?
The second one revolves around indigenous wisdom and what he calls the purity of non-white people.
How does he describe that?
He says that white leftists specifically tend to elevate non-white cultures, buying into this notion of inherent wisdom in indigenous peoples. He notes that indigenous usually means technologically primitive non-white peoples in this context.
He uses an analogy.
Yeah, he mentions the mystical appearance of the tribal chief in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom as an example of this kind of portrayal.
And he connects this to distinguishing fiction from reality.
Yes, he argues that leftists have a major problem distinguishing fiction and reality. He even draws a parallel to the Therian or otherkin movement people identifying as non-human animals, like a betta fish or a wolf. He sees it all as blurring lines between subjective feelings and objective reality.
How does he apply this specifically to race and crime? That sounds like a sensitive area.
It is. He claims that ordinary, everyday leftists refuse to accept data suggesting, for instance, that black men commit more crime than white men, or if they do accept the data, he says they attribute it exclusively to white racism.
And he rejects that explanation.
Completely.
Yeah.
He argues they can't accept the possibility that black men just choose to commit more crime or that it might stem from a personal flaw. He links this refusal back to the idea of maintaining the purity of the non-white peoples.
And this leads to a villain.
Yes. He says this concept has a much more sinister balancing point. In this fairy tale narrative, the necessary villain is the straight white man.
So, putting this all together, if he sees this as a kind of fully formed fairy tale worldview, how does he lay out the different roles? Who plays which part in this story, according to him?
Right. He breaks it down into archetype. The helpless maiden, in his view, includes black people, gay men, transgender individuals, immigrants. They're the ones needing rescue.
Okay. Who else?
The good wizard figure represents indigenous peoples with their perceived mystery culture. Sometimes, he says, it's a magical black person, citing examples like the Oracle or Morpheus from The Matrix.
And the villain we mentioned.
The evil villain is consistently the straight white man. Then you have the knight in shining armor, the great hero, that's the feminist, specifically the straight white female feminist.
And what about straight white men on the left?
They get cast as the sidekick. He calls them the allies.
And the upshot of all this?
His core claim is that people buy a lot of nonsense because it fits into that story. The narrative becomes more important than the facts, essentially.
Which really highlights that tension he mentioned between being factually correct and feeling morally right.
Exactly. And he uses some quotes to illustrate this. He mentions the NPR CEO allegedly saying that our reverence for the truth might have become a bit of a distraction.
A distraction from getting things done.
That is preventing us from finding consensus and getting important things done. Yeah. And he quotes AOC saying something like, there's a lot of people more concerned about being precisely, factually, and semantically correct than about being morally right.
And Mr. Reagan's response to that is?
Is pretty direct. He argues that in order to be morally right, you need to know what's factually correct. You can't separate the two.
He gives examples.
He does. He brings up the obesity is healthy claim, again, contrasting it with the medical fact that being fat is unhealthy. He argues accepting the truth has moral implications for health.
And the biology example.
Yes, the importance of a doctor knowing a patient's actual biological sex for treatment, regardless of gender identity. He insists that no amount of belief is going to change the reality in such situations. These are his illustrations of why he thinks facts must come first.
He really hammers this point that understanding reality is absolutely critical, avoiding disasters and improving things. So what specific provable facts does he believe are essential? Things he thinks even children should know.
He lays out a list of what he calls provable facts that really every school-age child should know. Quite a list again.
Let's hear it.
Okay, according to the source, Christianity is a huge benefit to the world. Capitalism is a net benefit. Black people are not systemically disadvantaged or oppressed in America. Men and women are different. The federal government is saturated with corruption.
Quite definitive statements.
Very. He continues, love, kindness, respect are not defined by accepting everyone's delusions. The idea of equality in God's eyes doesn't mean equality in every way. And finally, straight white men, collectively, are not a great evil, nor have they ever been.
And his conclusion based on these facts.
His assertion is that America took a sharp turn downward and has been declining ever since. Feminists and radical left academics and the media convinced over half of America that these things are not.
So why would people choose the fairy tale then? Why does he think it persists if reality, in his view, is so clear? He says it's more fun.
Yeah, he frames it as the ugly truth versus the beautiful lie. It's psychologically easier, he suggests. He uses the example of discussing cultural development, noting that a primitive culture has an inferior level of technological development, but the individuals still have the same value in the eyes of God.
That sounds like a nuanced point.
He agrees, calling it a difficult concept to express without being labeled racist by, in his words, a lot of stupid people.
Yeah.
So he argues people find it easier to just say any criticism of culture is the same as a criticism of race and therefore racist.
The path of least resistance, social king.
That's his argument. This leads to what he terms the weaponization of discomfort. Calling someone racist, he claims, gives the accuser a sense of power, makes them feel morally superior, and sets up a social hierarchy. They're the good ones. You're the evil one. This conditioning, he says, builds the fairy tale world.
And it's just easier.
The fairy tale's just easier, he says flat out. He gives the example of a sister whose husband transitions. It's easier to just pretend Stephanie is a real woman than to cause drama.
So avoiding conflict reinforces the narrative.
Yes. And acting super offended or using overreaction as a weapon becomes a tactic, he argues, to shut down challenges to what he calls ridiculous ideas.
Like which ones?
He lists things like questioning if the wage gap is really caused by sexism, stating that being obese is unhealthy, or suggesting that unarmed black men would be shot less by police if they committed fewer crimes. These are his examples of truths that cause offense.
And he provides examples of these reactions.
He does. He references content often highlighted by accounts like Libs of TikTok, showing what he sees as freakouts and insane things. He quotes or paraphrases comments like, diet culture within itself is racist, or complaints about blatant medical fat phobia, where a doctor blames everything on weight.
Any others?
Yes. People declaring pronouns like it and they, saying, I enjoy looking like a clown, or I don't abide by gender. I'm built different. He also includes clips of people expressing intense frustration, like one saying, why is it that white folks support anti-blackness racism through our silence or defensiveness? All that fucking gymnastics. Why can't we just leave black people the F alone? White supremacist culture is American culture. Fuck you. Do better. I'm tired. Fucking sick of it.
Strong emotions there.
Very. And another example he uses is someone addressing Republicans directly, saying, listen to me. You are the people in history they warned us about.
Yeah, okay.
Wake up, wake.
So Mr. Reagan's take is that people get pressured into agreement.
Yes, he believes people are bullied into accepting these ideas, creating this fully fleshed out fairy tale universe that he claims some on the left inhabit.
And how does he contrast this with conservatives?
He claims conservatives rely on the truth to make sound moral judgment. He argues that those on the left know that they will lose basically every debate, so they avoid engaging, which allows what he calls absolute hogwash to be force-fed without challenge.
He has a final analogy for this.
Yes, he says living in this fairy tale world might feel cozy, like a warm blanket that shields you from ugly realities, but ultimately, he concludes, it's really a straight.
Okay, so to wrap up Mr. Reagan's core argument, he suggests that some political filter through his fairy tale lens end up prioritizing a comfortable story over factual reality. And his solution.
His conclusion is that society needs to shift back towards understanding what he considers basic fundamental facts, teaching them in school as a way to, in his words, make America great again.
So, building on his idea of the ugly truth versus the beautiful lie, a final thought perhaps for you, the listener. What might be the long-term consequences for any society if comfort or a preferred narrative consistently gets prioritized over facing factual realities, especially challenges?
It's definitely something to think about. Yeah. The source itself ends with some very dramatic closing lines.
Let's hear them.
He says, it's not that our liberal friends are ignorant, it's just they know so much that is not so.
Why?
We're at war with the most dangerous enemy that has ever faced mankind in his long climb, from the swamp to the stars. And it's been said if we lose that war and in so doing lose this way of freedom of ours history, we'll record with the greatest astonishment that those who had the most to lose did the least to prevent its happening if we lose.
Yeah.
Freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth.